Hello everyone, Storm11 here. Today we'll be having an update on some of our upcoming severe weather setups that will be going on across parts of several plains and also for parts of Dixie Alley. There's also one severe weather setup tomorrow for parts of the Lower Hollow Valley, Tennessee Valley, and also a potential severe weather setup for parts of the Carolinas and even for parts of the Mid-Atlantic on Saturday as well. We also definitely got to pay attention to early next week as well. Before you get started with this video, if you guys like weather related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do that stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we'll be having more updates on some of these upcoming severe weather setups as well, so definitely stay tuned for more updates as well. We're going to get started with the watch warning advisory display. There's a couple things that's going on in the central and several plains. One that being most notable is severe weather is going on for parts of central Oklahoma. That is a severe thunderstorm watch that's in effect for parts of central southern Oklahoma, even into parts of northern Texas as well. It's also very windy down there as well. That's what these brown boxes are. And just to the north here, we got winter weather advisories and even a blizzard warning for parts of central Kansas as well. But what's probably something that should be mentioned is what's going on in southwestern Texas. Now, I believe we do have several wildfires ongoing down there, which, speaking of fire weather, this is the outlook for fire weather for today. There's actually an extreme risk for fire weather, something you don't see very often on their fire weather outlooks. And you can see here how does include places like Abilene, San Angelo, and Brownwood, Texas, as well. That's in that pink shaded region there as well. And then again, I do believe there is some wildfires going on down there, and unfortunately, some evacuations are also going down there as well. So if you do live in these areas here, just be aware. Don't burn anything or anything like that. Even areas in the critical and elevated risk, you should not burn anything out there as well. It's windy, humidity is low, temperatures are warm, perfect conditions for wildfires there as well. Here's the SPCA outlook here for severe weather. We do have a slight risk for severe weather from central Oklahoma, and that does extend all the way down into parts of most of Louisiana into southern Mississippi. Now, it also includes parts of eastern Texas as well. The greatest tornado risk will be found in southeastern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. Wind, similar thing, but there's another area up in the parts of northern Texas and Oklahoma. And hail is going to be the main threat for most areas, but there is also a hatched area up in the parts of northern Texas and central Oklahoma. That's where we can see the potential for 2 inches of diameter or larger sized hail up there as well. That does include places like Oklahoma City, Norman, Elmont, Midwest City, and also Moore, Oklahoma as well, which this is what radar looks like currently. And it seems like right now some of your severe storms looks to be kind of in the Oklahoma City metro in a little bit north as well. You can see here when you get to those pink colors, that's where you're going to find your hail. It's in those pink colors as well. There's also stronger storms as you get down nearby the Dallas and Fort Worth area as well. Almost all of these cells here is producing at least some type of hail. Either it goes from pea size to maybe up as large as half-inch sized hail as well. And I don't think so far we haven't seen much way of significant hail reports in just yet, but regardless here, we got hailstorms in the parts of central and southern Oklahoma, even down to parts of northern Texas as well. And we do expect it to continue throughout the night as well. So here's day 2, which is tomorrow. We got a small enhanced risk area for parts of southern Alabama, far southeastern Mississippi, and the far western part of the Florida Panhandle as well, along with a slight risk that has been expanded all the way up into parts of southwestern Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, and also southeastern Missouri. Here's your tornado risk. We do have a hatched area for tornadoes for parts of southern Alabama within that enhanced risk. That's where we see the potential for strong tornadoes as well, which is EF2 or higher. That includes places like Mobile, Pensacola, Ferry Pass, Florida, Pritchard, Alabama, and Wright, Florida as well. There could be some damaging winds. There could also be some hail. You also do notice there is a hatched area up in the parts of the lower Ohio Valley. That's where we could also see the potential for 2 inches of diameter hail or larger. That includes places like Louisville, Evansville, Owensboro, and also New Albany, Indiana, as well. Then on day 3, which is Saturday, we do have a slight risk for severe weather that goes from southern Maryland into southern Delaware. That goes all the way back down along the East Coast down into southern Georgia as well. All hazards seems to be possible on the setup here as well. That includes tornadoes, large hail, and also damaging winds as well. Saturday's been looking better as well. Day 4, there's nothing. But you get to day 5, which is Monday. We actually got an enhanced risk for severe weather for parts of eastern Texas. Surrounding that is a 15% slight risk that includes most of eastern Texas into northwestern Louisiana and southwestern Arkansas as well. It's not very common that you see a 30% area on day 5. I've seen 30% enhanced risks on day 4 before, but I don't ever recall seeing a 30% enhanced risk on day 5 before. I'm sure it's happened before, but I think I haven't seen, at least in my eyes. Anyway, so it is pretty rare to have an enhanced risk on day 5, and it will not surprise me if that does continue into day 4 as well. They do mention that the potential for strong tornadoes already on Monday as well. I'm very concerned about of how Monday could play out as well. Then here's day 6, which is Tuesday. You got a large 15% slight risk for southeastern Texas, most of Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas, southwestern Tennessee, all of Mississippi, and parts of western Alabama as well. And then on day 7, which is Wednesday, 15% slight risk for southeastern Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and parts of central and southwestern Georgia as well. And for right now, there's nothing on day 8 for the time being. So yeah, there are several days we got to keep an eye on for the potential for severe weather. And this goes over some of the same areas as well. But let's kind of get started with today into tomorrow. And you can see her model's performance. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst here, based on some of the convection that was popping up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But for wave activity from a weather model standpoint, that's not bad. But you also do notice here the other area we got to pay attention to is what's going to be going on in southern Louisiana. For right now, from the HER model, so this is pretty much in the middle of the night later tonight, and then you kind of get into early Friday morning. We need to pay attention to the storms on the southern end. Those storms will have a better opportunity to get some nice inflow. And the reason why the southern storms have a nice is in a nice place for inflow is because it's not really blocked by so much in the way of showers of storms. Meanwhile, storms up here to the north get blocked by a lot of storms off to the south. And we're not really expecting these storms up here in the parts of central Mississippi to be strong to, well, there may be a strong storm, but at least not really for severe storms in any way, but the southern end of the storms are the ones that pay attention to. Those ones have the better chance to become supercells that could produce all hazards as well. You can see here how to continuous move into Friday morning, and it seems like they become a little bit disorganized, but it would not surprise me if we honestly still see some organized storms ongoing in some of those areas as well. And then you do notice that there is some new development indicated by the HER model over parts of central Alabama, but they're not very organized. That's the thing. But I still would believe that there may be some more in the way of organized storms. We'll probably have to check those soundings to see why they're not very organized. But as I move this thing out of the way, look what's going on in the parts of southwestern Kentucky. There's actually some organized storms that are getting act together, and those are the ones that have the potential to produce all hazards as well, including for that potential for some very large hail as well, which we'll check out some of those soundings really about now, actually. Here's your significant weather parameters here. I know there are some high numbers across central Texas, but a lot of this here is capped. Not expecting severe weather in those areas. But look when you get down into southeast Louisiana. now you're starting to see some pretty elevated significant tornado parameter numbers here. And really, over a 1, conditions are favorable for tornadoes, but when you get over a 2, that'd be potentially favorable for stronger tornadoes as well. You don't really want to get the highest number because that could be a contaminated sounding, but you kind of want to get a more accurate sounding out there. Not the highest number, but not also the lowest. If you want to find an accurate sounding, which this is one right here. So this is for Friday morning. This is a pretty good sounding for the morning hours. There's a pretty strong elevated mix layer in the upper levels here. That could lead to the potential for more discrete mode for storms. The harmonic might be a little bit overdone with the convection on the southern end. I think the storms would be a little more discrete down there because of that elevated mix layer here in the upper levels, especially when it's kind of on the moderate side as well. I think we could see a little bit more in the way of discrete mode, if I'm going to be honest. But you do have a good hodograph, plenty of wind shear and ongoing here, wind direction with height. Dew point values, yeah, it's in Louisiana. Dew points are going to be high. Instability values, it's generally anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram, so plenty of instability. Downdraft Cape is pretty elevated. That could lead to some damaging winds as well. And then you got the lap rates, which can lead to that hail threat as well. They're also pretty elevated in the mid-level. So basically, this down here is favorable for all hazards as well. And that's in southeastern Louisiana. And you can see here how those numbers do stay pretty elevated throughout the morning, even when it gets into parts of southern Alabama, southern Mississippi, and eventually to parts of the Florida Panhandle as well. And really, as we get down in the parts of the Florida Panhandle, pretty similar sounding to what we found back in southeastern Louisiana. 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE, downdraft CAPE, elevated. Not as strong with the lap rates, but still somewhat supportive for some severe weather. You still got an elevated mix layer, which can lead to a little more discrete mode. Story to felicity values on the higher end, wind direction of height, and also a good hodograph. You pretty much got everything here. And also the 3K number is also pretty elevated as well. That's something I forgot to mention on the last sounding. The 3K values will be very elevated as well. Generally, at least a 50 would be favorable for severe weather as well. You do notice for areas far up north, there's already some elevated numbers out there as well. And look what happens here when we get into Friday evening here. Now you're starting to see those favorable tornado significant tornado parameter values getting up as far north as southwestern Kentucky, but there are still pretty elevated numbers down here in parts of Alabama as well. That's where the secondary wave could develop. And really what I see here, this is probably the limiting factor here, is that there's not a whole lot of wind shear going on here. So that's probably the main reason why that these storms are not very organized here, despite the very elevated uh, significant tornado parameter values. I think what's leading to that is the pretty high CAPE values. There's going to be plenty of CAPE. That's 2100 surface base. That's pretty good. But there's also a pretty strong elevated mix layer, so that's also going to help kind of limit when it comes to store development as well. The hodograph is pretty flat as well, and also lap rates in the mid levels. The low levels look good, but the mid levels not so much. So there are some limiting factors in the sounding here, and I think for the secondary wave, I don't think it's going to be as bad as the first wave as well. But as you get further north, let's get up in southwestern Kentucky, where things are looking better than yesterday. You still got a good hodograph. Dew point values did come up a little bit, where we're talking about mid 50 dew points. Now we're starting to see upper 50s to around 60 dew points. And instabilities also went higher. Now it's generally 1,000 to 1,500 joules per kilogram. Downdraft CAPE is also pretty elevated, which could lead to a wind threat. And also, what's probably going to be the main leading factor to the very large hail threat is the strong mid-level lap rates. Generally above a 7 here would be favorable for lap rates, but when you get a 7.5 to especially near 8, those will be favorable for some large hail as well. And with this elevated mix layer in the mid levels, that's going to help with the discrete mode as well. So, and there's also plenty of wind shear going here as well. So really, this out of here suggests all hazards. So you got that very large hail threat Well, generally large hail, some of those could be very large, damage and winds, and there could be a few tornadoes. I don't really see this being a strong tornado threat for a time being. Um, I would really like to see storage to felicity values to be higher if I wanted to see a strong tornado threat up here. But I think the main threat we should be focused on is probably be the hail and the wind up there. Pretty favorable conditions for a wind and hail combo type event. But the elevated mix layer, though, keeping things a little bit more discreet, we could definitely see some supercells out in southwestern Kentucky as well. Now, this doesn't mean this is going to be as bad as back at December 10th. December 10th, excuse me, um, had much higher wind shear values. I mean, I believe storage to felicity values were like 500 to 700, which is an extreme amount of wind shear. And instability values were also a little bit higher as well. In this event, we got much lower storage to felicity values. It's generally 200 to about 250, maybe close to 300 in some places. But I don't really see this being a strong tornado type of event like we saw back December 10th. But regardless, there's still that severe weather potential up there as well. You can see here some of those numbers do increase a little bit as you get deeper to Friday as well. Which here's the HRRR model. This is instability here, surface-based wise. You can see here pretty elevated numbers out there, generally 1,000 to about 1,500 joules per kilogram. Now there's a certainty of how far east this could get, but really to look at that, you will want to look into some of the mean layer or mixed layer CAPE. Pretty much about the same thing, because this is what's going to help kind of keep it going, as well as that mixed layer CAPE or mean layer CAPE. Pretty much the same thing. And you can see here, even the surface-based CAPE numbers are low, you still got that mixed layer CAPE pretty elevated as well. Still at least 500 joules per kilogram. That will still be favorable for some strong and severe storms as well. And that's what I kind of have uncertainty about. And then 3 CAPE, there's some pretty elevated numbers out there getting into the overnight hours as well. And that's also going to help keep these storms going as well. So that's also another thing we got to watch for as well. And here's your updraft helicity swaths, and you can see here a lot of them across the south here, but not very high updraft helicity swaths. I believe there's some stronger ones as you get closer to the Florida Panhandle as well. It's a little off the screen. But you can tell what I'm talking about here. Up into parts of western Kentucky, even up into southern Indiana, there are some updraft helicity swaths, and there is a couple of areas where we can see the potential for some stronger circulations as well. When you get those yellow colors, that's where we can see the potential indication for some stronger circulations with some of these storms as well. So then again, really compared to yesterday, up in the lower Ohio Valley, things have definitely looked better generally. Here's a little better look into the significant tornado parameters. You can see some of those pretty elevated numbers down to Alabama, but then again, the wind shear values are low. But that's also kind of in the middle of the afternoon. As you get deeper to the overnight hours, wind shear values do begin to increase some as well. But then again, there's a very strong elevated mix layer which can help limit thunderstorm development. So I think in reality, I think those storm centers going to be more isolated, which is not really a good thing. Consider you got some pretty decent storage to felicity numbers as well. But then again, in Alabama, all hazards are possible, even with the second wave as well. And as you get further north here, we got pretty good numbers up here. This is near Bowling Green, and you can see here still decent amount of instability here. This is what I'm talking about here. Surface-based CAPE, well over 1,100, and then you got the mixed layer CAPE, close to 1,000. That's the number to focus on later in the night. Don't pay too much attention to surface-based CAPE. In the overnight hours, you got to pay more attention to the mixed layer CAPE. That's something you got to keep an eye on as well. It's still got a pretty decent elevated mixed layer in the mid levels. It's not very strong. Dew point values are also elevated, right around 60. That's favorable. Plenty of storage to felicity. Lap rates again in the mid levels, a little bit on the stronger side. Dry Downdraft Cape is elevated and got a good hodograph. The sounding is favorable for all hazards. Isolated tornadoes, damaging winds, and also for the potential for large hail as well. And of course, as you get deeper to the overnight hours, these numbers do begin to back off a little bit as well. And then we begin to move on to Saturday, which we'll use the NAM for Saturday. This is in the morning hours of Saturday, and we already got elevated superset composite numbers. You can already tell that this is probably going to be kind of ridiculous run. Well, not really ridiculous, but there are some elevated numbers out there. And with the latest NAM, it wants to bring the severe weather risk further north as well. That's further north than what the SPC has it as well. We'll see if we do trend towards that solution as well, especially when the HERM model comes in range as well. But regardless here, further south here, there's some pretty good values out there as well. There's an 8 in East Central North Carolina, which if we get a sounding out there, oh boy, ignore ignore this. The possible hazard type things here, they're not very accurate. But anyway, this is what we got going on out here. You got a pretty decent holograph out here. You got with a mixed layer cape that can lead to the potential for large hail. Also for a large hail potential, you also got elevated um, mid-level lap rates. Downdraft cape slightly elevated, but there's plenty of instability, and you also got elevated storage to fluidity values as well. You pretty much got all the ingredients for all hazards again. Large hail, damage winds, even some isolated tornadoes. For right now, I don't think we're going to see that potential for strong tornadoes, at least for right now. I don't see that strong tornado potential in these areas here. I think we have to pay a little bit more attention for that wind and hail combo, especially for hail as well, because it's not too often that you see an elevated mix layer in these areas in here, which is going to help with the hail potential as well. It's also going to lead to discrete mode as well. As you get further south here, you got pretty elevated instability values. As you get further south here, still a pretty elevated lap rates, but wind shear does begin to back off, which does decrease the confidence for more organized storms. But I still think regardless here, some of the more summertime variety storms, you could probably see some good updrafts, and you could see the potential for strong winds, even for some hail as well. You also got a pretty flat holograph as well, which that probably decreased the tornado potential as well, especially with the weaker wind shear values as well. But of course, when you get to the overnight hours, those wind shear values begin to increase, but at the same time, those instability values do begin to back off as well. If there's an area I would really focus on for the better opportunity for severe weather, it'll probably be in the parts of central and eastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, even the parts of southern Maryland, southern Delaware. I think that's the area. That's where we're going to see some of the more better wind shear values, because as you get further south here, you're lacking on the wind shear as you get further south here. But I think regardless here, really anywhere from parts of Maryland and Delaware through eastern Virginia, central and eastern North Carolina, eastern South Carolina into southern Georgia. I think we could see some severe weather in these areas as well. It could change. Still some time for changes here, but I think so for right now. I think severe weather seems a pretty decent bet for some of these areas as well. So that's Saturday out of the way. Sunday, generally mostly quiet, but as you get into Monday, we got storm system comes out of the Rockies. And you can see here by peak time heating on Monday does indicate the potential for thunderstorms for parts of southeastern Oklahoma into Texas as well. And you can see here it becomes a little bit more of a close offload, just a little bit, stays stationary kind of over the Red River area. And then on your Tuesday, the severe weather risk moves further to the east as well, over most of Louisiana into parts of Mississippi, even back into Arkansas. What's also interesting from the GFS ball is that it's got a training of thunderstorms over parts of Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And if that's correct, what you can see here, that sticks around for a long period of time. If that were to be correct, that could be a significant flooding event in some of these areas in here, but there's not a very good agreement with that. The European model is a little bit more amped, and it doesn't really show that potential there. So I'm not sure how I feel about this new GFS run here, but it has been consistent with that. But we'll see where models trend with that. There's more uncertainty as you get into Wednesday as well, especially when the GFS models got a pretty weak low. 1,007 millibars, that's a much of a weaker low on Wednesday as well. But let's get a little bit more detail uh, with the GFS, and this is the superset composite here. Now, early on, so this is in the morning hours on Monday, you already got some elevated superset composite values in the parts of southern Texas, which if we do get sounding out there, you will notice here that there is a mid-level cap here. I do believe there is going to be capping earlier in the day, which is going to prevent showers of storms from developing, but what's also going to lead to is a more unstable atmosphere as well. The longer the cap holds, the more unstable the atmosphere could get later in the day as well. But even without this cap here, for the morning hours, you got a little bit of elevated mix layer in the mid levels, strong mid level evaporates, elevated downdraft K values, decent amount of instability, a good hodograph, plenty of wind shear again as well, and all hazards potential. But then again, you still got that mid level cap in there. So there's going to be a cap earlier in the day, but as we get later in the day, this is about right around peak time heating. Honestly, I think this is a little bit too fast here. I think it's going to be a little bit more focused, a little bit further to the west, especially when the GFS does have a progression bias. But even being a little bit faster, maybe being a little bit too fast with it, if we do get a sounding in southeastern Texas, we should start to see that cap erode away. And if it's going to load for us, which there we go. You can see here the cap is gone, but it also doesn't have much way of an elevated mix layer in here. I feel like it's going to be underestimating that elevated mix layer a little bit. I think it's going to be a little bit stronger. But even without the elevated mix layer, you still got a pretty good environment here. Nice hodograph, plenty of instability. Some of the mid-level evaporates. It's also elevated. Strong wind shear as well. And really, overall, this is a pretty good sounding here for all hazards again. But I also do see that potential for strong tornadoes as well, because those wind shear values are going to be on the higher end as well. And then again, medium range guidance does typically underdone the instability. So I do think there might be a little bit more instability out there to what the GFS is suggesting, which we'll check out the European model here in a little bit. You can see here with those pretty elevated superset composite values. You can see here I continues into the overnight hours as well. Here's Tuesday. Pretty much favorable conditions over parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, even in the parts of western Alabama as well. You can see here I continues in the overnight hours, and then that severe weather risk potential could go into Wednesday, which does have elevated superset composite values as far north as southeastern Kentucky. As well, going a little off the script, but then again, Wednesday there's plenty of uncertainty, so we won't get too much into detail for Wednesday for now. But as we look into some other things here, like the low of a jet, it's going to be on the higher end. This is peak time here for Monday, and then again, I think this is going to be a little bit too fast here. But even if it's fast, still got a pretty nice low of a jet out there. Close to 70 knot low of a jet. That's pretty strong for a low of a jet. Here's dew points. Pretty elevated dew point values out there, likely going to be deep in the 60s for most areas. Instability, surface-based instability, a little bit further back off to the west, but there you go, still pretty elevated instability values, up to 2,500 in some places. The mid-level evaporates are also pretty elevated as well, especially if you get back further to the west. That could lead to a large hail threat. And I think that's pretty much it from here. Let's check out the European model here. So 12 o'clock Monday, it's already got thunderstorms developing back into central Texas. Those are areas that really do need rain. So hopefully you guys could get some rain out there. But as you get to 4 o'clock here, you already notice that the European model is a little bit slower, but it does have some scattered storms well ahead from the main cluster for back off to west, which is a little bit concerning as well, because some of these storms are in a pretty good environment for severe weather. I mean, look at the level jet at 4 o'clock. I mean, that is a nasty level jet for peak time heating, which if you look into instability at the same time, you got estimated values up to 2,500 in some places. So this is a pretty favorable environment here for all hazards, including that potential, I hate to say it, for the potential for strong tornadoes as well. If trends do continue, of course, there's still a decent amount of time for changes, but this has been very consistent here, as we all know of over the last several days. But then again, this is a pretty good environment here for severe weather. And if we do got elevated mix layer comes in a little bit stronger and at least in more discrete mode, there's going to be some trouble here, certainly. So you move on to 8 o'clock here. Here's your main cluster here, still far off back to the west here. That could be a mesoscale convective system there, or an MCS. And that main threat could be damaging winds, but there could also be that potential for isolated tornadoes as well. And that's just going by reflectivity standpoint from the Euro. It can change. Then again, the Lova Jet's still pretty strong out there. At 850 millibars, them winds are ripping up there. Then again, still got plenty of instability out here. And when you look into dew points, of course, no surprise here, pretty elevated dew points out there as well. And then you move on to 8 o'clock Tuesday, your severe weather risk is pushing off to the east here. It's now approaching Arkansas and Louisiana at this point. If you look into the Lova Jet at the same time, still strong out there, but the instability, as expected, will be backing off a little bit. But then again, I think the European model could be underestimating the instability here, as it typically does here with setups like these. Here's 3 o'clock here on Tuesday. Got the potential for strong storms as far north as southeastern Missouri and as far south as southeastern Louisiana. Then again, here's the Lova Jet. Still got a pretty impressive Lova Jet out there. And I should note something else. Is that at one point, the trough becomes a little bit more negatively tilted. If we kind of go back to Monday here, you will notice here the trough does become a little bit negatively tilt. And that's not a good sign. There typically of negative tilt troughs can lead to some big time severe weather setups as well. That helps increase those wind shear values. But even if it's going to be negatively tilted or not, we can still expect some severe weather out of this up here. No doubt about it. As you move on to 10 o'clock Tuesday, you got the potential for strong storms as far north as parts of the lower Ohio Valley vicinity. Alright, that's 850 millibars. Let's go back down to 850 millibars. Still got a good Lova Jet out there. Instability, I still do believe it'll be lacking a little bit on the instability from the European model, like I said several times. Dew points could be a limiting factor out there, but it's got 60 dew points as far north as southwestern Kentucky, maybe even to far southern Illinois. And then you move on to Wednesday here. So they got a pretty amped system. Your low's over Chicago at this point. But if you check out the GFS, it's weaker with the low and has it over Cincinnati at that same time. So then again, there's still a lot of uncertainty as you get into Wednesday here. GFS is not as amped, but the European model is pretty amped with the system as well. So really overall, still put decent amount of uncertainty for Wednesday, but we do have pretty good confidence that Monday and Tuesday, especially Monday, we could see the potential for some significant severe weather, especially on Monday as well. But anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit the like button. If you really like my channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification to never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. Or answer you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.